Devebhivarshati pashun kripayari rakshuhu. Dharto chilindhramiva sapta dinani sapta. Varsho mahidram anaghaika karesa lilam. Gopar makhe pratihate vraja viplavaya. Deve bhivarshati pashun kripaya rirakshuhu. Dharto chilindhramiva sapta dinani sapta. Varsho mahidram anaghai kaskare salilam. Gopair makhe pratihate vraja viplavaya. Deve bhivarshati pashun kripayari rakshuhu. Dharto chilindhramiva sapta dinani sapta. Varsho mahidram anaghai kakare salilam. Vipalaya. Deve bhivarshati pashun kripayari rakshuhu. Dharto chilindhramiva sapta dinani sapta. Varsho mahidram anaghai kashare salilam. Gopair makhe pratihate vraja viplavaya. Deve bhivarshati pashun kripayari rakshuhu. Dharto chilindhramiva sapta dinani sapta. Varsho mahidram anaghai kakare salilam. Pralaya. Deve bhivarshati pashun kripayari rakshuhu. Dharto chilindhramiva sapta dinani sapta. Varsho mahidram anaghaika re salilam. Gopai, by the cowherd men, Makhe, in offering a sacrifice to the King of Heaven. Pratihate, being hampered. Vraja viplavaya, for devastating the whole existence of Vraja Bhumi, the land of Krishna's pastimes. Deve, by the King of Heaven. Abhivarshati, having poured down heavy rain. Pashun, the animals. Kripaya, by causeless mercy upon them. Rirakshuhu, desired to protect them. Dharta, held up. Uchilindram, uprooted as an umbrella. Iva, exactly like that. Sapta dinani, continuously for 7 days. Sapta varshaha, although he was only 7 years old. Mahidram, the Govardhan hill. Anagha, without being tired. Eka kare, in one hand only. Salilam, playfully. Translation. When the cowherd men of Vrindavan, under instruction of Krishna, stopped offering sacrifice to the heavenly king Indra, the whole tract of land known as Vraj was threatened with being washed away by constant heavy rains for 7 days. Lord Krishna, out of his causeless mercy upon the inhabitants of Vraj, held up the hill known as Govardhan with one hand only, although he was only 7 years old. He did this to protect the animals from the onslaught of water. Purport. Children play with an umbrella generally known as a frog's umbrella, and Lord Krishna, when he was only 7 years old, could snatch the great hill known as the Govardhan Parvata at Vrindavan and hold it for 7 days continuously with one hand, just to protect the animals and the inhabitants of Vrindavan from the wrath of Indra, the heavenly king, who had been denied sacrificial offerings by the inhabitants of Vrajabhumi. Factually, there is no need of offering sacrifices to the demigods for their services if one is engaged in the service of the Supreme Lord. Sacrifices recommended in the Vedic literature for the satisfaction of the demigods are a sort of inducement to the sacrifices to realize the existence of higher authorities. The demigods are engaged by the Lord as controlling deities of material affairs, and according to the Bhagavad Gita, when a demigod is worshipped, the process is accepted as the indirect method for worshipping the Supreme Lord. But when the Supreme Lord is worshipped directly, there is no need of worshipping the demigods or offering them sacrifices as recommended in particular circumstances. Lord Krishna therefore advised the inhabitants of Vrajabhumi not to offer any sacrifices to the heavenly king Indra. But Indra, not knowing Lord Krishna and Vrajabhumi, was angry at the inhabitants of Vrajabhumi and tried to avenge the offense. But competent as the Lord was, he saved the inhabitants and animals of Vrajabhumi by his personal energy and proved definitely that anyone directly engaged as a devotee of the Supreme Lord need not satisfy any other demigods, however great, even to the level of Brahma or Shiva. Thus, this incident definitely proved, without a doubt, that Lord Krishna is the personality of Godhead, and that he was so in all circumstances, as a child on the lap of his mother, as a boy 7 years old, and as an old man of 125 years of age. In either case, he was never on the level of the ordinary man, and even in his advanced age, he appeared a young boy 16 years old. These are the particular features of the transcendental body of the Lord. And again, the translation. When the cowherd men of Vrindavan, under instruction of Krishna, stopped offering sacrifice to the heavenly king, Indra, the whole tract of land known as Vraja was threatened with being washed away by constant heavy rains for 7 days. Lord Krishna, out of his causeless mercy upon the inhabitants of Vraj, held up the hill known as Govardhan with one hand only, although he was only 7 years old. He did this to protect the animals from the onslaught of water. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gora Tushe Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we're continuing now in this section of Bhagavatam, this wonderful description of various pastimes in sort of a nutshell form. And naturally, Krishna, he's getting a lot of attention in these. As we were saying last week, that various incarnations, they may be getting one text, maybe two texts, but Krishna is getting many texts. So, and this one is focusing very sweetly on that great pastime of the lifting of Govardhan Hill. And whenever I hear this pastime, I remember always there's a pastime of Srila Prabhupada, where one of Srila Prabhupada's disciples, he was very intelligent, and he had read quite a few books, and he was reading a book on the geography of India, and therefore the geography of Vrindavan, and he found the geography of Govardhan Hill. And when he added up all the dimensions, he went to Srila Prabhupada and he told, Srila Prabhupada, I've been reading all these books. I've been reading this book on, the dimensions of Vrindavan, of Govardhan and everything. And it's really making me relish, Krishna book, because I'm able to see, they went here, they went there. But I have a slight problem. When you add up the dimensions of Govardhan, it couldn't fit as many cows and gopas and gopis, as it says in Bhagavatam, that all fit underneath there. How is this possible? And so he was waiting for Srila Prabhupada maybe to respond with some Shastrik Praman, some previous Acharya, maybe something to clarify as to how they all fit. And Srila Prabhupada said, you read too many books. That was Srila Prabhupada's response, because these pastimes, they're transcendental. And all of their behavior, actually I always find it weird. Whenever that story comes to my head, I find it funny that he finds the dimensions the weird thing, and not that it was a 6-year-old boy holding up a mountain. If that 6-year-old boy could hold up a mountain, surely he could accommodate all of the cows and gopas underneath it. Surely that would be a secondary concern. So this is the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. They're beyond our understanding, because the rules by which they play are not the rules by which we're normally bound by in the world of karma, the rules of bondage which tie us to a conditioned nature, the rules of Leela, the rules of Krishna Leela especially, but the rules of all Leela, of all pastimes, act only by the singular rule, not of logic or of physics or of anything else. They act merely by the rule of what is pleasing for Krishna. What pleases Krishna, what allows him to taste the rasa with his devotees, what allows him to taste all of this sweetness. Often there's the point made in Bhagavad Gita that there is no need of a moon or a sun in the spiritual world. And yet we find in Golok Vrindavan, at least we find what people have written about Golok Vrindavan, that there is very much a sun and a moon. But it is not a sun and a moon providing light. It is not a sun and a moon that is providing illumination. Golok Vrindavan can illuminate itself all at once. The purpose of those astrological, those features in the sky is in order to facilitate the pastimes of Krishna. They're there that he might have a daily schedule to go out and care for the cows, because it is very pleasing to him. So again, physics is not the underlying principle for any of the features of pastime. It is what is pleasing to Krishna. And this pastime here is a very central one. Govardhan itself plays a very prominent role, obviously, in our parampara and in any strand of devotion to Krishna. Govardhan, we know Srila Prabhupada, before leaving his body, he asked that he could be taken on a cart around Govardhan, to go on Govardhan Parikrama. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur as well. Now I'm mind blanking. It's Govardhan in Jagannath Puri. Mahaprabhu points at it and he says, this is Govardhan. I'm forgetting its name. Yeah, Chataka, yeah. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, even though he left this world, he ended his worldly pastimes in Kolkata, he was actually residing there on Chataka for most of his final pastimes, expressing a desire to be there for the end of his manifest pastimes. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and our Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada, both of them had a desire very strong in their Antya Leela to associate with Giriraj Govardhan. And we know there is a great importance to Govardhan. Govardhan is described, it's described as Krishna, Mahaprabhu, when he arrived in Vrindavan. He saw Govardhan and he identified this is Krishna. And we know Shastra throughout describes Govardhan as Krishna. It also describes him as something greater than Krishna. Govardhan is also described as the greatest of all devotees, which is another term that Mahaprabhu used. Mahaprabhu at one point, he saw Govardhan and he said, this is Krishna. But at another point, when he saw Chataka, he said a verse spoken by Srimati Radharani. And this verse glorifies Govardhan as what? It glorifies it as the greatest. It glorifies him as the greatest of devotees. And Govardhan, in many ways, even though he has this great position, in ways somewhat reminiscent even of Jagannath, there's a bit of contrary moods. Because of that merciful aspect, there's some contrary moods, and there's different various descriptions of how Govardhan came to be. What is the origin, the birth, the Janma Leela, if you will, of Sri Govardhan. So various Shastras, Padma Purana has different pastimes. The Bhavishya Purana, which is normally not held as a very reliable pramana because it's likely been tampered by the British in the colonial period. The Bhavishya Purana, there's lots of predictions in there, which seem to be a lot like the British inserting propaganda. It talks about prophesying Queen Victoria and things like that that normally aren't really the business of the Puranas to comment on such minor and pointless details. But they weren't minor and pointless details to the likely interpolators. However, that's not to say that all of it is. Srila Prabhupada did say it's a valid Purana, but it's just that it's sometimes not the strongest Pramana because we don't know where's the interpolation and where's the Bhavishya Purana. However, in the Garga Samhita, which Bhaktivinoda Thakur accepts as authoritative, there's described one pastime, and that's a pastime that I thought, because Bhaktivinoda Thakur very much endorsed the Garga Samhita, I thought that one is a very fitting one. And in it, it's described that after the esoteric pastimes of the Rasa Leela, which obviously we won't get into, after they were complete one time, Radharani, she asked Krishna, she said, well, this is a very, this was a very sweet pastime. You've been very pleased by it. It's very pleasing to you, Krishna. And I would just ask one thing. If you could grant it to us, could you give us a mountain, a hill, at which we can engage, around which we can engage again when the Rasa Leela is performed again, and when all other pastimes in Vraj can be performed. We know Govardhan supports all of the denizens of Vraj. So please, could you give us something like this to support the pastimes? And Krishna, he says, for sure. He says, I will do. Tatastu. Let it be done. And it's said, it's described, that at that point, there was like a shining sort of light that came from Krishna's heart. And leaving Krishna's heart, it planted itself in the ground. And planting itself in the ground, it started growing and growing and growing and growing. And it was growing immensely. Actually, Govardhan is much larger. We've all seen, most likely, Govardhan. And he's not that big now. But we hear actually in Shastra that when he was first growing, actually when Krishna lifted him up, it's said that the Gandharvas and the Apsaras would say, we don't have space to move anymore. This is clipping our wings. Sanatan Goswami, he describes this. It's also said, It's said like this. It's also said that the trees on top of Govardhan, they would brush leaves with the trees in Indralok, almost to rub the point in. So it was very, very tall, which is obviously, when we go now, we don't really see Govardhan reaching the heavenly planets if a 6-year-old boy were to lift it up. However, it was very, very big, and it kept on growing and growing and growing. And then Krishna, at one point, he puts his hand and he says, calm down, if you grow any more, you're going to consume the whole world. So then Govardhan stops. And that's how Govardhan reaches this massive point where it can be said, again, if Krishna lifts him up, the Gandharvas and the Apsaras say, hey, we need room to move. That in Indralok, the trees' leaves become brushed. But it's described, I think as well by Sanatana Goswami, that the reason why Govardhan is smaller now is because when Krishna left Vrindavan, that is how Govardhan expressed its pain of separation. Govardhan began to shrink. So Govardhan shrinks in its pain, in its dislike of the lack of association of Krishna. Obviously, this is more emphasizing the mood of Govardhan as the devotee than Govardhan as Krishna. So this is the general, speaking of, say, the genesis. And then Garga Samhita later speaks of the story we also hear of Drona Maharaj, the king of the Himalayas. As we know, mountains are living, they're persons, maybe not all rocks, but many prominent mountains are personalities. So the king of the Himalayas, Drona Maharaj, he had a son named Govardhan. And so Govardhan, he appears in a similar way that Narad Muni, he appears as a son of Brahma, even though his body is pre-existing. And we know Srila Prabhupada says, Narada, he appears like a person who goes to sleep and wakes up the next morning. He's not in a brand new body, but it's almost like he has come back into existence, because Narad's body is obviously transcendental. So Govardhan, in a similar way, appears then as the son of Drona Maharaj, the king of the Himalayan mountains. And one day, a Muni, Pulastya, I had to write his name down. Pulastya Muni, he appears and he asks a boon, please, I would love to carry this mountain to Kashi. I would like to carry it there, so please give me this. And of course, he's a great Muni, and so the Maharaj said, okay, take my son. And so he carries, and he's going all the way to Kashi, and this is difficult. And then they take a sort of pit stop in Vraj. Because by his transcendental potency, Govardhan made it that Pulastya Muni had to sort of relieve his body from the travels. So he sort of, took like a bathroom break on the trip. And taking the break, he obviously had to put Govardhan down. And putting Govardhan down in Vraj, which was, of course, the transcendental desire of Giriraj Govardhan, Govardhan decided, okay, this is it. And he made himself, again, so heavy, because only by his mercy was Pulastya Muni able to pick him up. It's not so easy. That's why it was such a great feat that Krishna could lift him up. So he returned to his normal immense weight, and then when Pulastya Muni went to pick up Govardhan again, it couldn't be done. And so Govardhan now, he had traveled all the way from the Himalayas. He was meant to go to Kashi, but he decided Vrindavan's the place for me. So he stays in Vraj in this way. And then, so that's sort of like that's one description from the Garga Samhita as to the origins of Govardhan. Garga Samhita is interesting because even though Bhaktivinoda Thakur quotes it a lot, Bhaktivinoda Thakur sees it as a great pramana, it's one of the few shastras that we quote that scholars in general have always struggled with. Scholars will say various points about why they think it couldn't actually be an ancient Vedic literature. They'll say there's points here and there with words, linguistic analysis, so on and so forth. And I was listening to a class by His Grace Madhavananda Prabhu, and he was commenting on this. And he said, as much as he'd like to, the Vaishnavas, that right now we don't actually have a really good counter-argument like we do in other domains with the dating of Bhagavatam and etc. We don't really have any good counter-arguments against what the scholars and academics say. We simply have to accept that Bhaktivinoda Thakur saw this pramana as valid, and therefore we too can. Because who are the scholars to tell us what is authoritative? But Bhaktivinoda Thakur is everyone to tell us what is authoritative. But whenever that happens, it reminds me a little bit of an issue we had again with the scholars, where we couldn't have a response. With our parampara list, prior to Mahaprabhu, well, actually prior to Lakshmipati Tirtha, there is some dispute because the Mutt of Udupi, their parampara was completely different from Madhva going down. For the first few links, like Narahari and so on and so forth, there was some agreement. But then at one point, I forgot who it was, but at one point in the parampara, it splits off and it's completely different. And so the scholars, they would say, oh, well, here we can see in Baladev Vidyabhushan, all of them, they forged it. They just made up a list of names. And of course, we didn't accept such a bogus proposition, but we didn't really have a counter-argument. And it was the same sort of thing. And devotees had to take it on faith. However, it later turned out that in their great confidence, the scholars just didn't check every other mutt. So there were other mutts that had the complete exact same list, up until Lakshmipati Tirtha. They didn't mention Lakshmipati Tirtha, but that's not really an issue, because their lists are based on who is the acharya of their mutt. It's not based on who is an initiating guru. So to have one break, obviously there needs to be a break for our parampara to then form. So that's an example of when we had to say, well, we have to trust the great previous acharyas, and of course Srila Prabhupada, our current acharya, and so on and so forth. But then it turned out the evidence was provided. But I often wonder that prior to that sort of research being done, the devotees would have been in a similar situation as they are with the Garga Samhita. But because of the strength of all the overall other arguments, there's no real reason to be confounded by that. In a similar way as that issue that people thought, well, we're always going to have to take it on faith. In the same way, what's more important is that actually with each individual point, we'll never have the evidence to try through our Aroha Pantha, our little ascending process, to try and prove every single thing. At one point, the reason why Sharanagati is so essential is that at one point we must take that mood of Sharanagati and accept things on the authority of the great acharyas and sadhus and Vaishnavas who have given these things. Because it's not to say that it's blind faith, but it's a very educated faith. They've been right on everything else. And we've accepted them on so many great grounds. Surely we can accept them on something as, in the grand scheme, minor as the authorship of a book. So anyway, so that's some comments on the Garga Samhita. So then Govardhan, it exists, yeah? It stands. And so we know the pastime. Every few years it happens in Bhagavatam, right after we hear about the ritualistic Brahmins. And actually Sridhar Swami, he says in his commentary on Bhagavatam that actually the Govardhan pastime, we can say, in one sense, Krishna did it entirely to give mercy to those ritualistic Brahmins. Because actually the Govardhan Puja, not the Govardhan Puja, the Indra Yagya was performed in the locality of those ritualistic Brahmins who had been described just prior. So it was in their locality that the Indra Puja was normally performed. So Sridhar Swami, he says that actually this pastime was done so Krishna could give his wonderful darshan to those Brahmins, who otherwise would have missed out on it if it had been performed elsewhere. So it's said that the root of this pastime, of the Govardhan Leela, is found already in that previous chapter, that sort of establishing the ground. And also, it makes sense, thematically, we're exploring the world of empty sort of ritualism. So, it's happening like this, and everyone's getting ready. And it's happened a few times already. We know of the routine. Krishna would have already seen this happen a few times. But now he's 7 years old. So now he's sort of thinking, well, enough's enough. I've grown up now. Now it's time for me to find out what's going on. My spiritual master makes the point that we know in Padma Purana it says that great personalities age at 1.5 speed of what normal personalities do. So Krishna likely maybe would have been 11-ish. Obviously 6 in years, but maybe 11 in appearance. So because of this, so 11, but appearing to be 6, 7. So Krishna's like that, and he's saying, well, I've had enough. Let's find out what's going on. And so he goes to Nanda Maharaj and he asks him, he says, well, what's going on? What's happening? And initially, Nanda Maharaj, he's sort of like, it's all right, just do as you're told. We're going to go and we're going to make this puja. And then Krishna, he makes a point. He puts his foot down almost, and he says, you are a great personality. And the great personalities do not discriminate between the lowest of people or the highest of people. They see all souls, all individuals as equal. And especially with the great charity of giving them transcendental knowledge. They do not discriminate, they do not hold back. So you, Nanda Maharaj, please enlighten me. You have taught me some things about caring for the calves. Now please teach me this great philosophy with which we are executing right now. And so all of the cowherd men, they were very pleased. They found it very sweet in their vatsalya to see such a small child asking such serious questions. And so Krishna, eventually Nanda Maharaj, he becomes convinced and he says, okay then, I'll tell you. And he says, this is the tradition of our forefathers. For so long we've been doing this. We've been worshipping, doing this great Indra Puja. There's no real place in the Vedas for it, but it is a great tradition. And that's not necessarily a bad point. Tradition is a valid pramana. It's not a high pramana. I forgot which category it's in of pratyaksha or anuman, but it's one of them. It's considered a category of one of them. We know there's actually 10 pramanas, and Jiva Goswami condenses them into 3, of shabda, pratyaksha, and anuman. But normally that list is 10. Jiva Goswami sort of simplifies it when presenting it. And actually the Rupa Goswami and all will occasionally appeal to tradition as a pramana for, say, appearance days and things like that. It doesn't seem absurd to appeal to the tradition of, say, the Vrajvasis, so on and so forth. But it's never really given a prominent role. Just because it's a valid pramana, it is always sort of treated as a lower one. Because tradition itself, while authoritative to a small degree, is nowhere near as authoritative as even what we normally think of with pratyaksha anuman, and then it's nowhere in the ballpark of shabda brahman. So tradition is, just because it's a tradition didn't mean it's necessarily bad, but it is again not a very strong pramana. So Krishna then he asks, he sort of starts asking questions about this. And he says, so who are you worshipping? And then, of course, Nanda Maharaj says, we're worshipping Indra. Indra is providing all of the rains, which answers Krishna's next question. Why are we worshipping him? What will happen if we stop? Nanda Maharaj, he's saying, well, who provides the rains? And without the rains, where do we get grass? And without the grass, how do we take care of the cows? And if we don't take care of the cows, then what's the point of us being us? This is our whole identity. So of course we need the rains, so we should keep on doing this. And then Krishna, he responds, he speaks the Mimamsa philosophy, which is very, very, very sweet. Because here is Krishna, the knower of the Vedas, the composer of Vedanta, who knows all of the Vedic literatures. He understands their great conclusion. He starts speaking a faulty and incomplete philosophy. That person who the whole Vedic literatures revolve around, he starts saying, well, actually, is it not work that's supreme? If you do a good thing, then that person, he has to give you something good. And if you do a bad thing, then he has to give you something bad. So it's not the devas. It's not the devas who are supreme. It's work that's supreme. And actually, they still exist, the Mimamsas. They're very much declined because Vedanta sort of converted away most of their adherents. But they'll say like this. They'll say, karma is supreme. Even the gods, even the demigods, even God himself is a slave only to karma. They're very atheistic. And so they have this idea, the supreme aspect of reality isn't personality, but it is action. And so that's why they're very, very, very intent on preserving the Vedic yagyas and all, very, very precisely. Because if you do it precisely, then Indra himself can become your slave. That's their idea. And so Krishna, he's speaking this idea, this very atheistic idea, Krishna is speaking. And he's saying, have you even seen Indra? Does he ever even turn up? He's off in the heavenly planets. He's off in Indralok. He's doing his own thing. He doesn't care what you're doing, pouring out a few things. And now he's sounding even much like the atheists today. The atheists today will say, I don't care for God. I don't see him. What does God give me? I've worked for everything I have. Prakrite kriyamanani, it reminds me of that shlok very much. So much their false ego has built up that they're completely deluded by it. So they will say that, but then, of course, they still can't answer who is providing their existence. If God isn't giving them anything, maybe they can, through the faults of ahankar, explain, oh, well, I've cooked this meal, I've made the money to buy this. And obviously, originally, they haven't. Carl Sagan, the famous atheist, he said that in order to make one apple pie from scratch, one has to create the whole universe. Because you're always, otherwise, to make an apple pie from scratch, you're really not making it from scratch. You're just recycling the materials that have already been given to you. You'd need to create a universe on its own in order to actually create anything from scratch. But even ignoring that, they can't even justify right now why existence is existing. Why is there existence? Who is undergirding the very reality with which they so arrogantly proclaim that they are the ruler of? They cannot answer this. But of course, when Krishna speaks it, this isn't rascaldom. This is very sweet. He's trying to bring his pastime. And there's a reason why he's bringing his pastime. There's a twofold discomfort that Krishna has with this puja. One is what Srila Prabhupada has mentioned here in this purport. These are my devotees. These are the great Vaishnavas. Their hearts are devoted to me, and all they need is to love me and serve me with devotion, and that's all they will ever need. Everything else will be met. Why are they getting disturbed and going to some other conception? Why is this other conception entered into their mind? And so Krishna is speaking like this. He also makes, I think it's actually a pretty clever point, that, well, the rivers, they're not doing any pujas. The rivers, they're not doing any yagyas, and the rain still rain on them. So we can see, Indra, he's doing his own thing. You don't need to please him like this. So Krishna, he's making it for that first discomfort. And then there's a second discomfort. And the second discomfort, he's thinking, what's Indra thinking? Indra, he's a demigod. He should have some understanding. He should know that these Vrajvasis, they're the greatest of all Vaishnavas. How inappropriate that he's accepting worship from the most elevated people in all of existence. There is no one more elevated than the Vaishnav. And here's Indra accepting their worship, demanding their worship. We hear this was the specific point. We know, obviously, this pastime is very much about humbling Indra. Indra needs to be humbled. But this is the specific point where Krishna was saying, now this ego has gone too far. This ego needs humbling. We know sometimes it can be difficult when we're associating with devotees, because devotees are so humble. They'll sometimes, out of their humility, they'll glorify, or they'll say nice things, or they'll offer respects. But if we... out of their humility, not thinking themselves anything great. But if we accept that, that becomes a bit of rasabhas. It becomes a bit offensive. It becomes a bit arrogant. The devotees so sweetly, we know there's a great culture among the Vaishnava to say many great things about each other. We'll often compliment each other and appreciate each other's qualities. But if somebody starts saying, actually, yeah, I am this, and that, all these nice things that they're saying about me, they're true. And people need to keep on saying them. And if the devotees don't keep on glorifying me, well then what's up with that? That itself would not be as bad as this, because at least then it would be a Vaishnava, a Vaishnava sort of expecting some sort of Vaishnava dealings. Of course, in one sense it would be bad to demand these things, because they think them to be true, even though they are true. But this is even worse. This is Indra. And Indra is saying, yes, the great Vaishnavas, they should worship me. I own the worship of those people who Krishna himself worships. This is a great amount of arrogance. And so Krishna, he's very, very disturbed. And because of this, he says, actually, Govardhan, we can see Giriraj Govardhan. We can see him. And he is providing so much for us. We should worship him instead. And initially there was some sort of discomfort. Should we actually do this? But Krishna, we know he has so well captured the hearts. It's actually said that when Govardhan was being lifted, I'm always using my right hand. When Govardhan was being lifted, all the cows, they were being brought under. And because they were brought under Govardhan, there was none of the normal agricultural tools that the denizens of Raj would normally use to control the cows. And so the cows were running around everywhere. It was really hard to control them. But Krishna, while holding up Govardhan, it said he would play his flute slightly. And by playing his flute, he was able to control them all. Because by hearing the flute playing of Krishna, they were completely captured. And so, even though this tradition was so strong, even though all of the Gopas, they all genuinely believed that if they did not do this, well, then the rains won't come. They were captured by Krishna's demands. That sweet Krishna, he spoke, and they said, okay, we'll do it. We'll do two pujas. We'll do one for Indra, and we'll do one for Govardhan. And then Krishna says, there's no time. We need to please Govardhan now. Take all of the offerings that we have prepared for Indra and give them to Govardhan. This is what we must do. And then they say, oh no, can't we just do two? And then Krishna says, no. And then they say, okay. Because they're captivated by the beauty and will of Krishna. And so then, I had to write out the timeline because I always get it mixed up if they do Diwali afterwards or Diwali before. But then they perform Diwali, and then after Diwali, the next day, they start performing this great puja. And it's very, very great. In fact, it's said that the beautiful sound that's made from it resonates even all the way up to the heavenly planets. And when it enters into Indra's ear, it becomes an earache. His ear starts hurting, and he actually asks the Ashwini Kumaras, he says, what's going on? My ear's really, really hurting lately. And they say, oh, this pain, this earache, our diagnosis is it'll last around 7 days. This is the pain you all suffer. And so they all go and they prepare this wonderful celebration. The Brahmins are there, they're reciting the Samaveda. Everyone has come and they're singing. And this bhoga that is being offered, filled with ghee. Govardhan's not vegan. And it's filled with so much ghee that it's said to glow like gold. And it's said like a mini little Kailash. It's there. That was that was the view of how this mountain of bhoga was like. And so Govardhan, he's there. And he's ready to accept the offerings. And then suddenly a big arm comes out. Of course, Krishna, he's taken this form to inspire and to encourage the Vrajvasis. See. And Krishna says when this big arm, and it said actually that with the right arm, he was taking the offerings and eating them. Not with his left hand. Krishna will sometimes eat with his left hand, but Govardhan at least was following that. And he was eating with his right hand. And it said with his left hand, he was pointing it to the sky and wiggling the fingers to taunt Indra. It said Krishna was doing this. So with his left hand, he was taunting Indra. See, I've got all of your offerings. And then with his right hand, he was eating it all. And now we see Govardhan, the Mount of Govardhan has conquered the Mount of Kailash, and he has eaten it all. And finishing it all, now suddenly all the Vrajvasis, they become concerned. They're thinking, oh no, it's going to run out. They all quickly run and they prepare more bhoga, and there he's eating nicely. And Krishna, he's there and he's laughing and he's thinking, and he's saying to all the Vrajvasis, he's saying, see, Indra never came to eat your bhoga, but here Govardhan is so nicely relishing it. From now on, let us end worship of Indra. From now on, let us worship only Govardhan. And then then just before he leaves, Govardhan, he asks, well, the Govardhan who is Krishna with the hands, he says, you've given me such a nice offering, ask for any boon. And Nanda Maharaj, the king, he appears before Govardhan and he sort of thinks, well, actually, I have anything I could ever want. My life is fully satisfied. I only ask, and this again is so much embodying the great mood of devotion that we should move towards. Nanda Maharaj says, I only ask that Balaram and Krishna can be happy. That's the only wish I have. And then Govardhan says, okay, easy done. And then Govardhan, he disappears. So then now, everyone is very, everyone's very happy with this, yeah? And the whole festival keeps on going. And all the demigods, they're very happy as well. This is a very beautiful celebration that's going on. And the demigods, they're all participating in their own way. Except for one demigod who sends his spies. And his spies, they go and they see, what's going on? Because Indra, he's thinking, my ear's hurting, I'm hungry now, where's my bhoga? I'm not having a good day. Find out what's taking them so long. And the spies, they go, and when they see, they start laughing. Like, oh, who are these simple village people? What are they doing? They stopped worshipping Indra, the king of the demigods, and they're worshipping some rock. So they're laughing among themselves. What a joke. And so they go back to Indra laughing on the way, like these guys. They're laughing and giggling. And when they arrive then in Indra, Indra, he doesn't laugh when he hears what's going on. He gets very angry. And so when he hears this, he thinks, oh, well, they're worshipping a rock. And they're saying, the spies they reported, Nanda Maharaj is saying, oh, Indra never appeared to accept our offering. Indra has never given us as wonderful a celebration as this. So they're all speaking, they're saying, they're all saying sort of points of criticism for Indra maybe. And Indra, he hears this and he says, oh, well, I'll show them for thinking a rock's better than me. I'm Indra, I'm the king of the demigods. And so he calls a cloud. And the cloud that he sends is the same cloud that's called with the destruction of the universe. It's the same one that's brought when the whole, Mahapralaya happens. And so everyone's a bit afraid. And he speaks to the cloud and he says, normally everything ends with you. But today I just want you to end on tiny little tract of land named Vraj. Go there, destroy that, nothing else. And so it gets sent off, and everyone's rather afraid. All the other demigods who see this, they think, that cloud's saved for very, very destructive days. But Indra is angry. And so he sends the cloud, and we know what happens. The cloud almost nourishes Govardhan, actually. It's described, Govardhan finally had his rocks cleaned. It was like a shower for him. And there was a fresh new set of grass that had grown, nourished by the great cloud. So, Krishna, we know, so all the rains start pouring, and everyone starts thinking, oh no, now we've done it. Krishna, why did we listen to you? Now it's all over. Indra's upset. And Krishna, he doesn't worry. It's described that he doesn't even tighten his dhoti. He doesn't even tighten it, and sometimes we'll tighten our dhoti before we do something difficult to make sure it doesn't fall off. Actually, my dhoti, I was in Allahabad once, and I was in the kirtan, I was really enjoying it, and then I felt, oh, my dhoti started falling off. I was jumping around a bit too much, and it was very uncomfortable. But Krishna, he thought, this isn't even worthy of needing to tighten my dhoti. And so he simply, with his pinky, he lifts up Govardhan with his left arm. And lifting it up, he gives shelter to everyone. And it said when he lifts it up, all the dirt from the side of Govardhan falls down. And it forms a wall around the underneath Govardhan, so that the rains can't enter into flood. And within this area, now all of the Vrajvasis, they rush towards Krishna. And they don't rush towards Krishna because they need shelter from the rains. Even though they're afraid, the cows, they're sheltering their calves, the mothers are looking, where are my children? The gopas are thinking, what's going wrong? It said the bulls are looking at the clouds with anger in their eye. So how bulls are, they can get angry and aggressive, so the bulls are looking with red eyes at the clouds. What are you guys doing? But they all rush towards Krishna. Not because they need shelter from the rain, but because they want to rush towards Krishna, which is the central point of Govardhan Leela. Govardhan Leela is very much a calling to focus on what is essential, focus on what is important. Krishna is calling everyone to look at him, because this is the important, essential part of spiritual life. It is a point at which we don't say that Krishna will be our shelter. Sometimes people will make this point, and that's a valid point. Krishna will be our shelter. But that's not the main purport of the pastime. The main purport of the pastime is that we should always keep Krishna in the center, our eyes. It said every single Vrajvasi, even though there was countless, they were all looking towards Krishna. They were all looking towards him, but each and every one could see Krishna. Normally when you're in a big crowd and you're in the back of the crowd, you can't see what's at the front. But this was different. Krishna, through his potency, he allowed everyone to see him as clearly as Nanda Maharaj in the front. Rohini and Jashoda were on both sides. Jashoda was on his left side, massaging his arm. Rohini was also massaging his right side. They were there, and they could see Krishna right in front of them. But even those gopas and gopis who were far away in the back, they could see Krishna as well, just as clearly. Because Krishna is more than able to facilitate all of us keeping Krishna at the center. Because this is a natural role. This is the natural and most healthiest position. And so often we'll see Govardhan pastime and it seems scary almost. But actually it's described there was a festival underneath. It was a beautiful festival. It said that the Kashtoba, a gem that Krishna has, was like the sun underneath. Govardhan was covering the sun, but that gem lit up the whole place. There was whole waters, there was lakes and rivers of crystal-like water. It said that the rains pouring down the sides of Govardhan were like streams of pearls falling down the side. It was very beautiful, very festive, and that's what happens. They're all there, placing Krishna at the center. And there's very sweet pastimes happening as well among everyone there. It said some of the gopas, they would start teasing. I think it's Madhumangal, but I could be wrong. He starts making jokes. And he starts saying, Krishna, don't worry, you don't need to hold it up. I'm a Brahmin. I'll say some mantras and I'll hold it up for you. And then Jashoda, she starts getting angry. And she says, how can you joke at this time? Can't you see Krishna? He's having to hold up all of this. He's putting so much strain under his body. And then this Gopa, he says, well, what do you mean strain? We're having this wonderful opportunity to see this beautiful Krishna in front of us. Mother Jashoda said, beautiful? How can you find it beautiful to see the sweat pouring down his face from all the hard effort he is performing? And then this Gopa, he says, what hard effort? It's all me. I've sent out some mantras. I'm a very qualified Brahmin. He's teasing her. He's saying, I'm a very qualified Brahmin. I've said some mantras. Govardhan is being held up by my potency. Krishna, it's just flying above Krishna's finger. And Krishna says, yes, don't worry. Govardhan's just flying. See, this is so easy for me. I can even play my flute. And he starts playing the flute. And then the Gopa gets scared. And he says, hey, don't play your flute. He says, if you play your flute, not only will you be distracted, but Govardhan might be so entranced by its beauty. Govardhan might start dancing. And if Govardhan starts dancing, what's going to shelter us? And so like that, they're joking and playing among each other. And of course, at this point, this is one of the few points that the gopis are able to see Krishna. So they're very pleased as well. They're very pleased. Now we can see Krishna. There's no need to hide because everyone is looking at Krishna. And the gopis have a very special position. We won't get too much into the details, but they have a very special position in that even though everyone was looking to Krishna, who was Krishna looking at? It said that he was using his left arm because we know Radharani is on the left side of Krishna. And Radharani is the Shakti. Without that Shakti, how could he have the strength to hold up Govardhan? But also, because then holding up, the reason he uses his pinky is so that his vision to see Radharani is not obstructed with his pinky. So then he is still able to see her. But it said the other gopis, they tell her to cover her face. Because if she smiles or jokes or does anything, Krishna will become distracted from holding up Govardhan, and then he'll drop it on everyone, which is not ideal. So Radharani, she covers her face. But at one point, she also wants to see Krishna. All the other gopis are finally having the opportunity to see Krishna. So she takes a tiny look, and she smiles. And it said that Krishna, by seeing the slight hint of that smile, that's the only time his hand wavers. He gets a little distracted. And then she quickly covers her head and her face, and she knows, okay, don't do that. So better not to do that. And then she covers it. But anyways, I won't talk too much about that. So it's like this. These were a few moments where Krishna maybe wavered. And so it was very wonderful. It said that when Govardhan was lifted up, the caves would make sounds from the air rushing through them. And it was the sound of children playing. It was the sound of children being restless. And we sometimes say the sound of children playing and we think of it as a sweet thing. But when the temple wasn't under corona lockdown, we would hear the kids playing, and sometimes it wasn't exactly the most melodious to the ears. So the rough sound of the caves, though, has a sweet interpretation. It's said as a rough sound, a very intense, almost angry sound that was reverberating throughout reality, throughout the universe. But this sound is like the sound of children playing. It's a sweet intensity. And it said that the flowers, which were falling off all the trees, they were falling all the trees of Govardhan, they were falling down, they sounded like laughter. That was the laughter of Govardhan, the laughter that he had from the joy that Krishna was holding him. Because of that, he was laughing. He was feeling so happy. And that laughter was expressed, again, by those flowers falling down. And then, as I said before, the Apsaras and the Gandharvas, they're saying there's no room up here. The leaves of the trees, they're brushing against the leaves in Indralok. And like this is happening. And Indra, he's seeing that Govardhan isn't getting destroyed, so he's sending a few more clouds. And he asks for his spies to go after he sends down lightning. And then the spies, I'm just summarizing because I realize I'm running out of time, but the spies, they come back and they say, they're all dead. They're all gone. They got burnt apart by the lightning, and Indra is very happy. And then he says, but just go double check. And they go and double check, and then they're like, oh, sorry. they're more than alive. They're having the time of their life. And so, like that, he does like this, and then he's thinking, I need to keep on going, I need to keep on going. And then at one point, a demon messenger comes from Kamsa. And then he relays a message. He says, I'm so-and-so demon. I'm here to represent Kamsa. And Indra, he starts coming to his senses. And what is the message? Kamsa saying, I'm a fan of your work. I've sent out so many demons and they didn't do much, but you're really doing a good job. Like, it's a big thumbs up for me. Maybe we can pursue this relationship further. I really think we're on the same wavelength, you and me, We really get each other. So I think there's a room for a great friendship here. And then Indra, he's thinking, oh my God, I'm the king of the demigods and this great demon Kamsa, he's asking me for friendship. What do I do? And then so Indra, he goes to Brahma. He thinks, if anyone can help me, it's Brahma. Because Brihaspati actually advises him this. Brihaspati chastises him. He says, with 1,000 eyes, you're still blinder than the most blind men on earth. What are you thinking doing this? So Brihaspati chastises him like this. And then he goes to Brahma Lok. And then in Brahma Lok, he goes to Brahma and he says, look, what have I done? And Brahma says, you idiot, what have you done? And then Brahma says, actually, I did the same thing just recently, so I'm in the same boat. Normally I'd chastise you, but I have to help you out because, I messed up in that way too. I feel like I should help you out. He says, look, I can't help. I just stole the cows. I just stole the cowherd boys, but you tried to kill them. You're on the next level. So then after that, he leaves Brahma Lok, and then he goes, and then he says, of course, Surabhi, maybe that divine caste, she'll be able to help. And then so Indra, he goes, and Surabhi, she's not very happy to hear that he tried to kill all these cows. And so, I'll summarize anyway. So anyways, she goes and she sort of acts as the mediation, and then Indra, he repents, and Krishna is very happy to hear his humility. Krishna says, I only did this to humble you. And then all of this is happening, and then all the great demigods, they come, they give very great gifts. They give all these wonderful gifts to Krishna. And this is a great moment of devotion. This is what the demigods should do. But this pastime also shows the greatness of the Gopas, of the denizens of Vraj over the demigods, because they give all these opulent offerings. And then after they give them all and they leave, Krishna, he has all these really cool things, all these wonderful things. And and his friends are like, hey, what's this? And they pinch some from him, and they put it on as well. Like, hey, that's cool. And then they start teasing Krishna. Hey, who is that guy with the elephant's head? And he said, hey, who's this guy with the 4 heads? It said Brahma Vimohan Leela is Brahma Vimohan Leela and not Brahma Mohan Leela, because he had 4 heads to be Mohan with. It was Vimohan. It was a severe sort of bewilderment, because normally we only have 1 head in order to bewilder ourselves with. But Brahma bewildered himself with 4. So they said this 4-headed guy, and there's this person with an elephant head, and there was this really, who are those guys? And then Krishna said, don't worry. And they all went home and they had all these amazing tools, all these amazing sort of gifts given. And their parents said, where did you get these from? And they said, oh, like the demigods came and they gave this to us. And the parents said, okay. Nice story, you go have your lunch. Because that's the mood. Even while holding up Govardhan, the Gopas, they use their sticks to hold up to help hold up Govardhan. They were saying, we'll help you out, Krishna. And they were thinking, now Krishna's got it. With our help, we can support him. They were thinking all these things. They're called to devotional service. It wasn't just an attraction to Krishna. They didn't just go to be attracted to Krishna. They came to serve Krishna. They came not just because Krishna is beautiful, but sometimes we speak Krishna, the all-attractive, and that is good. But sometimes that all-attractive approach can be the sense of enjoying. I want to enjoy Krishna's beauty. They didn't come to enjoy Krishna's beauty. They came to serve. That beautiful Krishna captured their heart, and the response wasn't to think, I'm enjoying this so much. The response was then to serve. Again, Mother Jashoda and Rohini, they were massaging Krishna so that his muscles would be able to hold up. The Gopas, they were holding up with their sticks. They were doing all these things. And because of that, Govardhan Leela is very much, it is embodying what society should be. We are in the international